Do you guys have any gaming rituals? Games you find yourself replaying at least once a year or maybe every other year? Maybe it's a game you remember fondly from your childhood or a special time in your life. Perhaps it's a game that's a bit newer that you enjoyed so much you just want to go back to from time to time. In addition to new games I try every year, I find myself going back to a handful of my favorite arcade games of yesteryear. Another thing I always do is load up the latest release of MAME and see if the MAME team ever finally finished the emulation for Area 51 Site 4, the sequel to 1995's Area 51. Spoiler, they haven't. Normally I boot up the game to see the lack of inputs and timing errors and resign myself to play through the first Area 51 a few times over the next day or so and then move on to other things. This year, however, was different. I decided to dig a little deeper, not only into Site 4, but the development of the games themselves. This led me to the website of one James Mestemaker. If you check out the attract mode for Site 4, the only part of the game that actually does work in MAME, or on the actual arcade cabinet, you'll see James listed in the intro credits during the game's attract mode.
Crispy!
A quick perusal of his LinkedIn bio will reveal he worked on all three of the Mesa Logic rail shooters, Area 51, Maximum Force, and Area 51 Site 4. He's also worked on an impressive gamut of games that any self-respecting gamer these days would have heard of. Titles like Prey, Shadow of the Colossus, Rise, Son of Rome, Tabula Rasa, Star Wars The Old Republic, and more, with some of his most recent work being on the Demon's Souls remake for PS5. All of these games are wonderful, but we're here about that classic arcade life, so I reached out to James and see if he'd be willing to sit down and talk with me about his Mesa Logic days in developing the Area 51 and Maximum Force series. To my eternal gratitude, he agreed, and we set up some time to talk about some of the 90s hottest light gun shooters. Just in case you're not familiar with these games, Area 51, released in 1995, took full advantage not only of the 90s tendency to digitize literally everything, but also the rapidly developing world of 3D graphics. Earlier rail shooters like Konami's Lethal Enforcers had you shooting at digitized sprites while mainly moving from left to right or right to left. Area 51, however, goes full 3D with not only higher resolution 3D sprites and models, but 3D environments that the player moves through in real time. Area 51 sees the player becoming a member of STARS in order to maintain and contain an alien outbreak at the titular Area 51. Other digitized actors make up the STARS team and will be seen at various points throughout the story moving in the level. Shooting them by accident will deduct a health point, so in some ways they're really more of an obstacle than actual team members. Unlike Lethal Enforcers, which mainly focused on shooting bad guys, Area 51 places a large emphasis on shooting extra things in the levels like glass, barrels, lights, and more to try and unlock secret rooms and power-ups, which all lead to more bonus points, weapons, or just letting you have more fun with the game's digitized graphics. 1997's Maximum Force was more of a down-to-earth take on the light gun shooter, featuring the same gameplay with human opponents rather than an alien menace. Despite reviewing poorly, Maximum Force sold fairly well amongst arcade operators, and Mesa Logic developed one more railgun shooter, this time a direct sequel to Area 51, Area 51 Site 4. Site 4 is divided into two game modes. Site 4, which is a traditional rail shooter campaign, and training exercises, which takes place at Sites 1, 2, and 3, and are a collection of police trainer-style mini-games, which sees the player trying to accomplish a series of bite-sized shooting challenges involving the enemies from the main game. Hidden rooms can be found by shooting non-target items, and grenade weapons for the main campaign can be found here as well to make defeating the final boss easier, therefore encouraging players to try the mini-games and not just go straight to the campaign. Midway would later get the assets to these Mesa Logic developed games and the Atari Arcade Division's assets. The Area 51 brand saw two more outings, with 2005's Area 51, which shared only its name with the original game, and a sequel of its own, 2007's Area 51 Blackside, which again makes no real mention of the events of its predecessor. Midway folded a few years later in 2010, and the series has been dormant ever since, with its rights being sold off to other companies. With all that said, let's get to the interview. Hey everybody, it's Trent here. As promised, I've made contact with one James Mestemaker, who is on the development staff at Mesa Logic. You may know him for such famous arcade games as Area 51 and Area 51 Site 4. Also, Maximum Force, worked on all three of those games. He has a continuing career in the industry. And so I got up with James about a week or so ago and asked him if he'd be willing to talk about the development of those three games, because I think anybody who loves rail shooters and light gun games knows those games. Riven Mike, who is a moderator on my channel, we talk about it all the time, how much he loves that game. He's been looking to buy one for years, hasn't found one. But anyway, James is here, and we're just going to talk to him about those games and his time at Mesa Logic. James, how you doing? Are you doing all right?
I'm doing great.
So thanks so much for coming by.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reaching out.
No problem. So anyway, let's just get started off. So tell us a bit about exactly who you are and your current work, and maybe any work prior to the gaming industry.
So I'll give you a quick kind of rundown. I originally grew up in Michigan, went to school up there, went to a community college and studied movie production and kind of the old school animation, like the cell art animation type stuff. And it was right around the time that computer graphics were kind of coming on the scene. So Apple kind of had like Macromind Director stuff, and it was like really early stuff. There were also some really early 3D programs coming out that I got to work on at Michigan State through an internship. And I was like, man, my love was kind of movies, obviously art. I did a lot of comic book art and stuff, whatever. So I graduated. I was working at a Mexican restaurant up there. There wasn't a lot of opportunity in Michigan for any of that stuff. So I ended up moving to Texas, Dallas, and kind of just threw my resume everywhere. And I got a hold of one guy who knew a guy that said, there's this company that does video games, and I'm like, I want to make video games. That's cool. And that was Mesa Logic, and that's the company that made Area 51. So when I went in, I obviously didn't have any experience. I went in and I basically said, I'll dump your trash. I'll I'll scrub your bathroom. I'll do anything I can do to just kind of get in here. And they said, no, we don't need anybody. And I'm like, okay. So the next day I called them and said, do you need anybody today? I continued to politely pester them, and eventually he said, you know what, we do have something that you can do. And it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't anything. I didn't just hop in and start animating and doing stuff. They had me transferring files from California on disk into hard drive. But you know what? I was happy to do it because I got my foot in the door. Once I got my foot in the door, I did it for a while, and they allowed me to use the programs that they were using to make the art, to make the games, which I stayed late after work to do that. And eventually it got too busy for the very small team that we had, which was 6 until I got hired. And then they just needed someone to help out, and then I was part of the team. So that was my Area 51 experience. And how I got into the industry. I've been in it since 1994 I started. I'm still in it now. I work for a company in Austin, Texas called Blue Point Games. We recently got acquired by PlayStation. The last thing we released was the Demon Souls remaster, which was a launch title for the PS5. So I'm currently a special effects lead, and I have 4 people under me. So I have a fantastic team at Blue Point that I lead. So.
Well, it's good to hear you're still making quality games. I love the Soul series. They're some of my favorite. They really harken back to that kind of old school, more difficult designs. That's really neat. You're working on that these days.
Those games would be hard to make original now because they're so frustrating. But it's kind of cool being a part of bringing those back to life to generations that never experienced those before. So
yeah, that is a neat point. So About Mesa Logic. So I think everybody knows Area 51 series and Maximum Force. Did Mesa Logic work on anything else besides those three? And that's just my own ignorance, but I've never seen, I don't think I've seen a Mesa Logic logo on any other game besides those three.
Those were the three that we actually worked on. We did have a few kind of proposals. Atari actually wanted us to do like a Defender kind of remix, and we actually kind of presented that, and it didn't fly, unfortunately. But other than that was kind of the three and out as far as Mesa Logic went. The founder of Mesa Logic was Robert Weatherby, and he actually worked at Atari out in Milpitas. And he was the guy who basically invented Super Sprint, which was an old racing game. Very with like I think it was a 3-player with 3 steering wheels, top down. So he was part of Atari for a long time, and Atari contacted him and they had a game called Bounty Hunter, which was kind of a comic booky shooter game that they weren't really happy with, and they kind of gave it to Robert and said, "Hey, do you think you can do anything with this? We kind of sank a lot of money into it." And that's when Robert kind of went, "Okay, we're doing a shooter." And then I believe he saw like an article or something about Area 51, and that kind of sparked his interest. Like, it would be cool, like, instead of just being like a generic shooter, like a lot of them were like police trainer, and you're just shooting bad guys. Maybe we take it to like a different level and have aliens involved.
Kind of increase the threat level type thing.
Yeah. In kind of a supernatural way too. So I thought the concept was really cool, and it's kind of the time period when like X-Files and like all that other genre was kind of happening. So everything kind of seemed to really fit together when we were doing that. So.
And you mentioned the gentleman's last name Weatherby. If I remember correctly, there's an office in the later part of the game that has like Lieutenant Weatherby or something written on it. So that makes sense now.
That's correct. Yeah.
I never got that reference before. So that's a little bit about Mesa Logic and working there. So based on the release dates of the game, so I checked it out, and the original Area 51 hit in 95. And then so you had Maximum Force in between there at 97. And then Site 4 came along in 98. So just from an outsider looking in, it looks like all three of these were developed like either back-to-back or concurrently. So just let's start with the original Area 51. What was the day-to-day development like on that game? You've already talked about how it became an idea. Were those games developed like concurrently, back-to-back? Was it like, oh, we got to do bigger? What was kind of the timeline of those three games and their development?
Being honest with you, like the development was exactly what it was. It's like we go. It was very loose. It was very kind of open, and like we had conversations on what we wanted in the game, but there was not over planning. So it was like, this is what's going to happen. Everybody just did it. And made the levels, made everything work. We put the aliens in, whatever. As far as like after, we didn't know Area 51 was going to do anything, so we had no future plans at all, right? So we didn't plan for Maximum Force or anything like that. It's like, okay, this is our task. We need to get this done. And it was a really short development cycle overall. And one thing I want to kind of harken back to is one of the other interviews you had was you were talking to a person that did the live action
survival arts.
Yeah. So we used that in Area 51. We used the live action stuff, but we also used the aliens were all puppets, and we used stop motion puppets. So we would kind of work back and forth with California The guy that did the I'm going to date myself a little bit. The guy who did the puppet animation for the aliens was actually an animator for the old show Gumby.
Mm-hmm. With the
Yeah,
horse and the blockheads. I remember
yeah,
Gumby.
yeah. Nope. So he was one of those guys. So anyway, he would send us files with all the animated aliens, and then we'd get the video stuff and we'd block it out. And that was a large part of my job, was kind of making sure all that stuff was ready to put in the game, get it ready, and actually put it in the game. Um, but yeah, so it was basically, there was an idea that we were just going to go through Area 51. We did as much research as we could at the time that was available on the internet in
Yeah.
1994. You know, it, and believe it or not, it kind of holds up a little bit. Obviously, we took a lot of liberties with, once you get inside and all that stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
it was fun. I really liked kind of the attitude that our company had, where we kind of went in and just kind of made it our own and made it believable enough to where, people would want to play it. It's a fun game. Go out. Um, so once, your question was like the chronology of that to Maximum Force. So at the time we were up against starting 3D shooter stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like virtual cop, right?
Right.
Stuff like that. So we were starting to kind of edge out of the video, implanting video into light gun games.
Mm-hmm.
The light gun game started to like phase out around Maximum Force time, maybe a little bit before that.
Mm-hmm.
But we decided to. Atari really liked what Area 51 did, so they wanted another one. So we kind of went a different direction, did the Maximum Force stuff based on action movies, Bruce Willis. We just kind of went all out to do all those scenarios and everything. A
Mm-hmm.
lot more secret rooms. Um, Area 51, we had a few secret rooms in there if you shoot enough stuff, which is great. Maximum Force, we went crazy with the secret rooms and the combinations to get to those secret rooms. That was probably the funnest part of that game, in my opinion. But that was all video of actors and stuff. And to be honest with you, unfortunately, I never got to meet like any of the actors in Area 51
Mm-hmm.
or Maximum Force. I thought that would have been cool, but I never got to do that.
Yeah, and I have to scratch that off later because that was actually a viewer submitted question. Somebody asked, "Did you get to work with those guys?" Like they were the two actors in the very first Area 51. I can't think of their names, but they were the two actors in the first one, and like they had a face, like you could actually see them. But all the stars members in Site 4, they just have helmets, so there was a little less personality there. But that's a shame you didn't get to meet those guys at the time. So. Area 51, I feel like personally it was one of the more fair light gun games in an age which was all about getting quarters. So I've beaten the original game, and again, I've played it way too many times, but I've beaten it on 1 or 2 credits in a real arcade. And so there's other light gun type games out there like Terminator 2 or Revolution X. Those games are just straight quarter munchers. Like there is no way to defend yourself and shoot everything without taking damage. But Area 51 feels very fair. I think that's maybe what endures people to it, is it's very fair. Was that an intentional design decision that you guys set out to do, or did the cookie just crumble that way? So how did the more nitty-gritty details of like, here's how the gameplay will work, here's where the challenge will come from, were you a part of those discussions? How did that all come about?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned those two games specifically, because we had those two games in our office and we would play them
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and we would be like, "This is frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want our game to be this." So I mean, they were fun in their own way,
Of course.
and when you have free play and you can just keep going, that's something different. But we had our competition sitting in our office, and we would sit there and play it and go, no, this, you know what, this isn't fun.
Mm-hmm.
This is not fun. And so that inspired us to do what we did as far as making the game fun and making it approachable. Like we didn't want to, we wanted anybody to kind of walk up and do it and at least try it and not destroy them in like 5 seconds. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, thanks for 25 cents. You know, that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to kind of ease them into the, I guess, the fantasy of what Area 51 was
Mm-hmm.
and have fun. You know, like a like a mom and a kid can walk up and shoot a couple aliens and you know spend a couple minutes and have fun. Like
Mm-hmm.
you know, we weren't going for the hardcore gamers. We were just kind of going for everybody. Just try it, see if you like it. You know,
Yeah,
so
that's
it definitely was a conscious decision. Like because there were a lot of games out there that were just like, you know,
mm-hmm.
we're not going for hardcore gamers at this point. It's just let's get people playing games.
Yeah, and that's I can definitely tell that. I think just in my personal opinion, somebody may disagree. There's only one unfair section of the very first Area 51, and that's at the very end where the aliens rappel down. And there's one that's in the very corner of the screen. And a lot of times, especially nowadays, because the light guns are all 30 years old, it won't register if you shoot over there, and he'll take a pot shot at you and then fly off screen. But you guys did a pretty darn good job making it fair, in my opinion, because the game's just great. It's like you said, anybody can play it. And you guys didn't get to see this. I was talking to James before we started recording. Like me and my dad, you know, we would sit and play it like when it was in the shop to be fixed. And you know, mom, like you said, my mom, who's not a gamer at all, she could just, you know, it's very easy to understand. She could sit and play it. So, yeah, that's a good point. I think you guys did a great job of that. So, Maximum Force, that's like a little bit longer of a game. It's like longer Area 51, but with less story elements. And I know that Area 51 is no Romance of the Four Kingdoms or whatever as far as story, but it did have like a story. Like there's an intro, there's a very clear objective. There are some other STARS agents which you're interacting with throughout the game. That's one reason I really like it, is because if you suspend your disbelief, especially as a kid, you really feel like, hey, I'm here to do a mission. This is my team. I'm going to fight these aliens and get through this. But Maximum Force, and this is one thing that it was criticized for in reviews, it felt very generic.
Yeah.
So was that a design philosophy on purpose? Like this is just going to be more like generic action movie? And did that less favorable reception, did that impact the team at all when they went to develop Site 4 afterwards?
I think it absolutely did. I think everything that you said is absolutely correct. Um, we were asked to do an action movie shooter, and so we kind of put it out, and that's what Maximum Force was.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to, we did the rail shooter stuff, and we tried to, we came up with scenarios or whatever, but we knew, I think deep down, a lot of us kind of knew that it was super generic and people probably wouldn't be as interested in it as
Mm-hmm.
the last game. But what we did is we just packed a ton of secret rooms in it to make it fun for us. Like so there's so many secret rooms and so many we expanded on the idea of what we did in Area 51 where, you know, there's a lot of destroyable stuff that you can shoot on top of shooting the enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And we just like expanded it like 100 times in Maximum Force. And so there's just crazy amounts of secret rooms in there. So
Yeah, I played through Maximum Force again to get ready for this, and I've always been an Area 51 guy, never been much of Max Force, but I did play through it, and I was getting secret rooms, not even trying. Like, you know, having only played through it one or two times, I would shoot like a lamppost on the beach or something, and boom, secret room.
yep.
So you're not kidding. There really were a ton of secret rooms.
We just packed it full of secret rooms, and it you know we when I play games, I like that kind of stuff
Mm-hmm.
still to this day, and that was kind of a bonus for people that played Max Force. We didn't make them some are super hard to get, some are super easy to get, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I got a bonus, and it's like, that's cool. So it's a bit marketing, and it's a bit kind of gameplay, but I mean, if you feel like you're getting something like that, I think it makes the game fun, right?
I would agree, and I think that's huge. You know, the hot game right now is definitely Elden Ring, and
Yeah.
I think that's wise because it's challenged. You know, it's kind of funny. Like if you look at games in the '90s and the arcade games you make, they're just packed full of secrets, and it's a lot of stuff people will never see. Like, you
Nope.
know, and now you always hear the thing online. I don't know if it's true or not that modern game development, they always tell people don't waste time on stuff people won't see. But, you know, that's exactly what Elden Ring is doing because you can look at the Steam charts. The majority of people that buy Elden Ring do not finish it. But there is so much stuff and it doesn't tell you where it is, and people are going crazy for it. Um,
Yeah.
so there's probably some balance to be struck there, but I'm really interested to see what Elden Ring, what kind of effect that has on exactly what you're talking about. The make people feel like they've found something. I think that
Yep.
really makes people want to come back. It does me, at least.
We put a ton of stuff in the Shadow of the Colossus remake
Mm-hmm.
and a ton of stuff in the Demon Souls remake like that uh, in the recent remake. So there's a ton of like hidden stuff in those games
Yeah, and I
that
love it.
even now, like you go to like Reddit or any of these forums and people trying to figure stuff out, and they are amazingly adept at figuring out how to find this stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
I, we spend so much time like trying to make it tricky, but there's still stuff that has not been found in those games.
Well, you heard it
So
here first, folks. There's hidden stuff in Demon Souls remaster. You better go find it. So, moving on, I wanted to ask. So, we talked about the impact Maximum Force had on its design. So, Site 4 is kind of the oddball of the bunch because part of the game is what you would consider a traditional on rail shooter, but it's much shorter than the campaign in, say, certainly Maximum Force or Area 51 1. And then the other half of the game is like a collection of mini games, but they incentivize you to play the campaign by giving you weapons for the main game. So, can you talk about the thought process behind like dividing the game up like that and why it ended up that way?
sure. So at the time, one of the more popular light gun games was Police Trainer.
Mm-hmm.
Police Trainer was a light gun game that was just a collection of mini games, and it was doing really, really well. So the idea that we were presented with was we could do Police Trainer with Area 51 wrapped, a Area 51 themed Police Trainer,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the elevator pitch of what was going to happen. Um, I actually was okay with that, but I said, dude, I was talking to my boss and I said, if we're going to do another Area 51, we have to at least have a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved forward with the mini game stuff, and I moved forward on my own with the campaign stuff. So I built Site 4, I built the Queen, I built the level, I animated everything, I got everything going. Um, I ran everything through, and we got to a point to where they were talking about cutting my part of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and it was actually me and the programmer. It was our part of the game, and I'm like, dude, we're not going to sell this game if we don't have at least a campaign in there. And so we kind of went back and forth, and they decided that the police trainer stuff where you get in, you get out, whatever, pop in, pop out. Okay, maybe we can give you bonuses to go into the campaign. But dude, the queen, that whole part of that game was almost on the chopping block, dude. They wanted to cut it. They totally wanted to cut it, and I was like, dude, you're not gonna cut it. you can't cut this.
I think the Queen is like the most memorable part of Site 4. Like, she's in the marketing. I'll try to send you a picture after. I can go find it. One of the last things I have left over from my dad's cabinets is that on the side of the cabinet they had that big sticker of the Queen, which I ripped off of there and saved before we sold all our games. I mean, she's the most memorable part of that game, in my opinion.
It almost got cut, dude.
It's incredible.
Seriously. And they just wanted to have it would have been all like police trainer, like pop in, pop out stuff. And I fought so hard just to have that experience because I loved the original game.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Area 51. I loved the rail shooter. I loved all that stuff. And I'm like, dude, no. And even talking to the higher ups, I'm like, we're not cutting this. There's no way we're going to cut it. And I'm glad they didn't.
Well, obviously they listened. Thank goodness.
And they're like, well, how do we sell this? It's like two different games. And I'm like, so it's two different games. Who cares? I mean, I didn't care at the time. It's like,
I'm not.
I just wanted to. I'd been so deep into the kind of diving into Area 51 and what's going on, and Site 4 is a very real thing on that property. But I just wanted to go into the fantasy of creating, like, they had all this stuff kind of hidden back behind. Everybody looks at Area 51, but there's actually stuff behind Area 51
underground,
deep inside of it, in Site 4, and that's what that experience was for me, to actually kind of express, like, you know what, there's eggs in there. It's out of control. The government can't control anything, obviously, and there's a queen kind of roaming around in this underground bunker, and they're sending you in there, and it's like, she's bashing through like ceilings and throwing stuff at you, and I just thought it was really cool, like, just to go into that.
I think so too. I really like the idea of like it's strange for an arcade game at the time, but like how the damage to her carries over. So like if you were a skillful player in the earlier encounters, you got a better chance of beating her later on. So I thought that was always a really interesting thing. So speaking of the Alien Queen, because like I said, I've still got the sticker over there somewhere. I'll send you a picture. It's all tattered, but I still got it. Speaking of the Alien Queen, so the boss, if you could even call it that, in the first Area 51 was very anticlimactic. It was just like this weird flying saucer thing with feet, and if you shoot it enough, it blows up and you get the good ending. If not, you get the bad ending. So kind of what was the deal with that? So it was like the Alien Queen, like, let's do it justice this time? Or what was going on there with that?
Yeah, and I will throw myself under the bus. So we were up against the clock as far as like shipping and everything, and they said, and like I said, I was new coming out of school, whatever, and they're like, oh, you need to model, you need to do the ending spaceship, and I'm like, oh crap. So that's why the big feet kind of weird spaceship thing exists. It was totally my fault, and it looks goofy as hell. I completely understand. It's not my best moment, let's put it that way. But it was my first moment.
You got to start somewhere.
And I realized that 99% of the people that play the game will never see that. But I didn't understand the internet because it wasn't invented, and now it's everywhere.
I never, like, as a kid, I never thought much about it. I was like, Because I think it tells you like you failed to destroy the alien probe or something if you fail. So I'm like, okay, apparently it's just really bad if this thing escapes. As a kid, I didn't think much about it, so I wouldn't worry about that. But as an adult, I'm like, this is kind of strange. Like this thing just shows up, you're given no mention of it, you blow it up, and then that's the ending of the game. But it's better than nothing. Like, what if the game just ended?
And I think we were at that point. It's like, how do we end this? I hate to say that, but we're like, how do we, you get to this point. We didn't have a concept of a boss, of anything like that, or like an epic battle or anything. And it was like, all right, give the new guy.
Make him come up with a boss.
Have him come up with a alien spaceship. And it was literally the feet
from the big aliens, right? From the main aliens. Well, that's incredible.
Yeah. And that was it. And it was like, yeah, you got to shoot all the parts off and whatever. And then you kind of, I guess if you complete it, you go through the hole in the ceiling of the cave of whatever, and then you see like a recruitment video.
That's in Site 4. So in Area 51, I haven't figured it out because it's been so long. I could have swore as a kid I didn't blow it up all the way, but if you just do enough damage, it explodes. And so, so the game does kind of a weird thing, and I'm going to move into story and lore next if you remember any of it. But like if you beat Area 51, if you kill the Feet spaceship, it goes into this weird kind of like quasi-fact thing, and it's like, even today, Area 51 is a site, X amount of feet in Nevada, like almost like a real life thing. Whereas if you fail that section, it just says like, hey, you failed to prevent the alien menace, you should feel bad kind of thing. But it was kind of weird. Like if you beat it, it goes into like this fact thing about the actual Area 51, and then it gives you a little lore about the aliens.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, it talks about the crash in Roswell. It talks about a couple of different things that are actually, yeah.
So that was kind of a neat, I thought, blending of like the game world with reality. So I thought we would, and we're coming up on just our last 4 or 5 questions here. Thank you so much for your time. But story and lore. So you had given a few lore tidbits on your comments on another YouTube video a few years ago. It's part of what led to me finding you. And so since you modeled the enemies in the game, maybe you would still remember. If not, it's okay. Area 51 and Site 4. So there's a progression in both games. You start out fighting these zombies, for lack of a better word, in green and orange jumpsuits. And then like towards the later part of the game, you start running into the full-fledged aliens. So did you guys intend for the zombies? Are those like infected humans who will eventually turn into the aliens? Or are they like completely separate, like foot soldier creatures? Like what's going on there? Do you remember that part?
I do, absolutely. So the infection was, it goes to the humans, and they kind of turn into zombies. I guess the zombie thing is kind of played out, but we actually had a secondary stage, and I'm going to show you. So this is one of the models, the puppet models that we had, that was like between the human and the actual orange kind of alien creatures.
The Kron.
Yeah, the Kron. So, and these guys were actually green. And I don't know why they made them green, but this is one of the actual puppets that we had with those guys. So you would evolve from a zombie-like person into this, and then you would evolve into the Kron, which was the ultimate ending of what you had to do.
And so I noticed that both, like, and this is in Area 51 and it's in Site 4. So both of the enemies seem to have their chests torn open. So is the alien infection solely from the maggot things that gave me nightmares, or is it just like an airborne virus? Or is that something you guys didn't even consider? But if you look at both of them have chest wounds, and like the final alien forms, their chest is like their rib cage is kind of open. So I was wondering if that was like an alien throwback, or was that intentional, or just kind of a cool design decision?
It's probably a combination of a lot of what you said. Like it's a cool design decision. It is um, kind of spreading. Nowadays, it seems really weird to think about it, but it's like spreading virus, spreading like controlling everything. Yeah, back in the day, we didn't really worry about it too much. Nowadays, it's kind of weird, um, but but yeah, it's totally alien inspired. I mean, every game that deals with this type of stuff is
Mm-hmm.
like inspired by Alien and all those wonderful movies.
Yeah, it's like a trope. It's just added as its own trope from now on. And
Yep.
thanks for answering that. I'm probably one of the few people on the internet interested in Area 51 light gun lore, but I've always wondered that, like, what's going on? Is there a stage progression here? What's going on? So as far as Site 4, I wanted to ask, you talked about Police Trainer and how it influenced the mini games. So
Right.
the mini games in Site 4, so some of those seem like just straight up training exercises like the US government might be doing, like you're shooting at targets or you're shooting at barrels or whatever. And then some of them seem like they might be things that are actually happening, like shooting aliens at the shopping mall or blowing up the spaceships. So did you guys consider that some of those mini games were like canon to the story? Like these are things that are happening around Area 51, or is it all supposed to just be like a virtual training exercise, those missions?
It, it was supposed to be exactly what you said. Like it's supposed to be a mixture of, depending on what you choose, it should be a training exercise based on what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So so it can go at anywhere from like just targets popping up or live fire exercise. So that's that's really what we were looking for.
Okay. I can see that. And I actually played Police Trainer. It was one of the games Dad had growing up. And that was my big complaint with that game. Like, yeah, the shooting was fun and it could hold your attention, but it felt a little hollow because you're just like shooting like a colored ball or shooting like a target. And so, like, there's no stakes. And so, like, even with the poster you've got behind you, it says at Site 4, the future is in your hands. I think when you add those stakes onto it, like especially as a little kid with a suspended sense of disbelief, that goes a long way into making the game more interesting. So that's good to know. Just a few more from the fans, and I'll let you go. I know you're a busy guy. I've got work tomorrow too myself. So Riven Mike submitted this via personal message to me, and he just wants to know if you could talk a little bit about the actor digitalization process. I know you never met those guys, so do you have any experience in the digitalization besides the models?
So so just to make sure I'm clear, is it just a video of the people doing what they're doing?
Right, the live actors, I think is what he was
Yeah,
getting at.
yeah. So I didn't really have anything as far as involvement in those projects. Um, ultimately, um, I did actually get into that when I worked at Westwood Studios,
Mm,
but yeah, I think that there's a lot of casting calls. I don't know,
mm,
um, like a lot of actors are able to do that, and I know that you've talked to people that have done uh, acting in video games
mm.
also, where they've talked about kind of their experience. So that might that might be a better like avenue to kind of hear about what happens with that. I I don't have a lot of experience in that.
Okay. Haley Lockhart via my Discord asked, what was the inspiration for the secret rooms and mini games? Were there any concerns that they would break the pacing of the game? And I know you've talked a little bit about the mini games and why you included
That's
those.
actually a really good question. I don't think that so. So there's the arcade game experience, which I think when I got into it, they were expecting people to play for like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So now when we play video games, we can play them for as long as we want to.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about mini games and stuff like that, it's like breaking breaking the game flow of a 2 minute experience was not a consideration. It was like, okay, you go in, you do this stuff, you're playing, you kind of get a bonus. So that was kind of our that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make people feel like, you know what, I'm in here, I got this, and I got a little bit extra, and then it kind of comes back. So it's really hard to maintain a arcade game thread
Mm-hmm.
as far as like story or whatever, unless you play it a bunch of times. And once you played a bunch of times, then it probably doesn't matter. So that's just kind of my opinion.
An anonymous submission asks, whose idea was the Cron Hunter mode in the first Area 51?
I believe it was a programmer.
You just said, let's throw in this mode with like vomit-inducing colors for people who shoot all the good guys.
Yep. You shoot the first 3 star members going into Area 51. It'll go into cron mode.
That sounds like one of those childhood Mandela effect memories, like for some kid who didn't know what he was doing, and so he just went and shot all the characters, and so like 20 years later he sees the game and he's like, I swear there's this weird mode where you can go and all the colors are like messed up and you're an alien or something. That sounds like it could have caused that somewhere along the line.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine. That I thought it was brilliant because it's like a no-brainer. Very little work to make everything like different. So yeah, you should try it out if you see it.
Yeah, I've done it.
Don't shoot anything but the first 3 good guys.
And you end up Cron Hunter mode.
Try to play the game
without getting motion sickness.
Yeah.
So my last official question, it's kind of a joke question. Wacky Deli via my Discord asked, and he says he's sure the answer is no, but he wants to know if you had anything to do with the game being ported to the Tiger Electronics handheld, and what your thoughts were on that version.
No,
yeah, I didn't think so. It actually has a gun to its merit. It has like a little tiny pencil gun, and you can.
I actually got one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I didn't.
Out of all the handheld games out there, that's definitely one of them. So that's really all I have for you, James. It's been awesome talking to you and looking back. You've been amazing. Is there anything else you want to share, or is there something you're working on now you want to plug? Whatever you have to say, the floor is open to you.
Cool. I don't have much to say, Lee. I appreciate you reaching out to me. Old school games, new school games. I work for PlayStation right now, so I will kind of update you guys on what the next thing I am working on. If you're an artist and you like video games, man, it's a great business to be in. I would absolutely love to have more artists in video games and just do it, man.
If somebody wants to be a video game artist, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give them?
To be honest with you, I talk about this all the time. There is, obviously you can go to school, but if you're talented and you go on YouTube and you learn the tools and you can present people what you can do, you'll get hired, dude. That's it.
That's it.
It's that simple. You don't have to spend $80,000, $100,000 to go to school. If you're talented and you can just get on YouTube, get the tools, get something, and just start sending stuff out. That's what I do. Make it happen.
You can do it.
Absolutely.
So
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, James. You've been awesome. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any more questions, you can pop them below. Maybe if James sees it, he'll answer. And also stop by the Discord and chat. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care.